Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of RiesKitchen. Today we're going to make one of my personal favourites, and that's profiteroles. Gluten-free, of course. So let's get started. We've got water, unsalted butter, salt, plain flour, eggs, and then for the topping, dark chocolate and more unsalted butter. So to get started, all we need to do is in a medium-sized saucepan, put the water, butter and salt, and under a gentle heat just until the butter starts to melt. So now that that is simmering and all the butter is melted, I'm going to add all our flour, and using a wooden spoon, stir quite vigorously. Now you'll notice that I'm using a wooden spoon with a hole in it. That's just because it increases the agitation and makes it easier to stir. So in one hit, add the flour. So that's starting to come away from the pan now, in the bottom of the pan, as you can see as I'm stirring. So that's good to go. So off the heat, and we let that cool for just a minute. We can get our food processor ready while we're doing that. Now to pop it into the food processor. But if you don't have a food processor, you can use your mixer, or you can do this by hand, but it is a lot of hard work. The food processor really makes it a lot easier. And then we're going to add the eggs one at a time. We want to make sure that we don't get any shell. Okay, in with the first one. We want it well incorporated in before we add our next. Let's have a look. That's looking pretty good. So what we have is a thick, smooth dough in here. You can't overbeat this one. Now we're just going to spoon the mix onto our baking tray lined with baking paper. So literally. They don't spread, so you don't have to worry about having them too far apart. And just to get a slightly nicer finish, just using a palette knife or a butter knife, dipped in a bit of water so it doesn't stick, just smooth them down a little. They will smooth off in the oven a bit, but sometimes coming off the spoon they get quite a wonky shape. And then into the oven at 180 degrees for 35-40 minutes, depending on how big you made these. These are probably 40-minute size. Okay. Oh, this kitchen is smelling divine. So let's check them. So they're golden brown and they sound quite hollow. Now with all gluten-free, of course, we need to let them cool on the tray before we put them onto the cooling rack. They look great. So now that these have cooled, it's time to assemble them together. So we're just going to melt our butter and chocolate in a bowl in a double saucepan, remembering that water and chocolate are natural enemies. So a little bit of water in the bottom of the saucepan. Once it starts to melt, we need to keep stirring continuously. So while the chocolate's just getting started here, using a sharp knife, I'm just going to cut these. And you can see how beautiful and hollow they are. Perfect. So now that that chocolate is melted and all through with the butter, I'm going to turn that heat off and just leave it on the pot to keep warm. So I just have some whipped vanilla cream here. That's better. And then each one, just using a spreader, or you could use a palette knife, just popping that rich, luscious chocolate on the top. Now it will set hard as it cools. So don't forget, for all the details, check out my blog at the link below. And as always, the best bit is in the eating. Can't wait. The chocolate's rich, the pastry's light. Perfect to have with an espresso. Until next time, everybody. Ciao.